Welcome back to Movie Moshow. Today we are going to review the thriller film, Cannibal. If you like our content, don't forget to like and subscribe. We upload multiple times daily. Spoilers ahead. 10 years have passed since the events in The Silence of the Lambs, 1991, when the tale begins. A scarred and paraplegic man named Mason Verger, Gary Oldman, listens to Barney, one of Hannibal Lecter's caregivers at the Baltimore Mental Hospital, as he discusses their conversations and Lecter's friendship with Clarice Starling. The leather restraint mask that was used to hide Lecter's face while being transported is the item that Barney then displays to Verger in a box that he brought with him. Verger gladly agrees to Barney's $250,000 asking price for it. In Washington, D.C., FBI agent Clarice Starling, Julianne Moore, is in charge of a raid to capture Evelda Drumgo, an HIV-positive drug dealer, Hazel Goodman. Even though Starling has given the arresting team detailed instructions, the raid goes horribly wrong when one of the agents rushes Drumgo and her group after Starling tells them to stop because Drumgo is carrying a child. The majority of Drumgo's gang members are murdered in a violent gunfight, along with some of the agents. Drumgo takes a machine gun and fires when Clarice commands him to submit, hitting the woman. Clarice shoots Drumgo in a fit of reflex, killing him and drenching the child in blood. Clarice, who was donning a bulletproof vest, rescues the youngster and uses a nearby hose to clean it off. Official at the Justice Department Paul Krendler, Ray Liotta, whose love advances Starling had turned down years previously, disgraced Starling. Due to the publicity surrounding the cocaine bust, Mason Verger, a well-off, vicious pedophile who was one of Hannibal Lecter's victims, learns about Starling and her former relationship with the escaped serial murderer, Anthony Hopkins. Verger, who had an encounter with Lecter in the past that left him horribly deformed and disabled, is still seeking retribution for what happened. In an effort to bring Lecter out of hiding, he uses his political clout to get Starling once more assigned to the Lecter case. Starling is sent to Lecter's estate to get the new information Verger claims to have about him, an X-ray, which he will only divulge to her. Verger tells Starling about his relationship with Lecter when she first arrives. When Lecter was chosen by a judge to be Verger's therapist following Verger's conviction on numerous charges of child molestation, they came into contact. Verger, the only survivor of Lecter's victims, was duped into self-mutilation by Lecter after receiving a nitrogen popper. Lecter also tricked Verger into engaging in sexual excitation by strangulation at the same occasion. Verger is currently bedridden and confined to his remote mansion, but he is working on a complex plan to kidnap, torture, and kill Lecter with the help of his personal Dr. Cordell, Jelko Ivanek, and other goons. Chief Inspector Rinaldo Pazzi, Giancarlo Giannini, of the Questura is looking into the disappearance of the keeper of the Capponi Library in Florence, Italy, a Renaissance castle that houses rare books, historical records, and priceless works of art. Pazzi encounters the new curator during his investigation, Dr. Fell, who is actually Hannibal Lecter. Lecter quickly hears of Starling's public humiliation and reassignment to his case, as Verger suspected, and he writes her a letter that is both empathetic and sarcastic. Starling notices a weird scent on the letter, despite the fact that it seems to offer no information concerning Lecter's whereabouts. She brings it to a perfume firm, where the professionals tell her that the author used a highly expensive skin cream that could have been purchased from just a few stores worldwide, one of which is in Florence. Starling requests copies of any surveillance videos produced by cameras put in the shops from the police departments of the cities where the stores are located, including Pazzi's department. Pazzi identifies Fell in the tape and seeks to find out why the FBI is interested in him after witnessing one of his men making a copy of such a tape for Starling. Pazzi discovers that Fell is Hannibal Lecter after gaining access to the FBI's database of wanted offenders. He also discovers that Verger is willing to pay a $3 million prize to anyone who helps him catch Lecter rather than handing him over to the FBI, who is willing to pay a $250,000 reward. Pazzi contacts Verger's team in an effort to secure the higher reward and offers to assist them in capturing Lecter. While this was going on, Starling obtained the surveillance film from Florence, identified Lecter, and discovered that Pazzi had been looking up Lecter in the FBI database. She telephones Pazzi and counsels against attempting to apprehend Lecter on his own, but Pazzi disregards her advice. Pazzi coerces a neighborhood thief to put on an inexpensive bracelet and try to rob Lecter. Lecter is followed by the pickpocket through the streets of Florence. Lecter snatches the man by the wrist as he goes for his wallet, leaving fingerprints on the bracelet. He then sneakily stabs the man in the upper leg, severing his femoral artery. The robber is apprehended by Pazzi, who then steals the bracelet from him and leaves him to bleed to death on the sidewalk. Verger receives the bracelet with Lecter's prints from Potsy and verifies its authenticity. After Lecter delivers his evening lecture on the poetry of Dante to a gathering of academics at the Palazzo Vecchio, Potsy and Verger's men attempt to capture him, but their scheme goes horribly wrong. Lecter threatens to kill and eat Potsy's wife in order to subdue him with a drug-soaked rag and subdue him during the interrogation. In a manner similar to how one of Potsy's distant relatives was killed, Lecter executes Potsy by first slicing open his abdomen and then tossing him from an upper-floor balcony while wearing a rope around his neck. Lecter makes his getaway and decides to go back to the US to see Starling again. Verger tries to lure Lecter out of hiding once more after the unsuccessful kidnapping attempt by causing Starling more trouble. He pays Krendler to claim that she has been hiding a note from Lecter. The plan succeeds, and Starling is relieved of his duties. In the hopes that Lecter may get in touch with her, Verger's men continue to monitor her. Lecter, meanwhile, has been keeping an eye on both Krendler and her. Then Lecter purchases crystal and china for a fancy lunch while also robbing a hospital of its surgical supplies. He transports everything to a remote lakefront home that he knows is Krendler's. Afterwards, Starling receives a call from Lecter inviting her to a meeting at Union Station in Washington. The men of Verger follow her there. Starling and Lecter are talking on their mobile phones while they search the station's crowd of patrons for Lecter. He displays his affection for her and concern for the poor treatment she has had from the FBI, even joking at one point that he may make those responsible scream apologies. Despite Starling's attempts to stop them, Verger's men manage to apprehend Lecter in the station's parking lot. Starling makes an unsuccessful attempt to inform the FBI about Verger's scheme. Lecter is brought to the Verger mansion in the interim by Verger's men. Verger, a pig breeding expert from his days in the family meatpacking business, intends to witness Lecter being devoured alive by a herd of savage wild boars that Verger has specifically raised in Italy for the occasion. The screams of their victim have trained the boars to attack them. Starling visits Verger's estate by herself after the FBI declines to take action on her tip that Verger has kidnapped Lecter. She steps in just as Verger's goons are ready to let out the swine on Lecter, shooting the men and releasing him, but she takes a bullet to the shoulder and is wounded. Then Lecter saves her from the beasts. When an enraged Verger orders his doctor Cordell to shoot Lecter, Lecter convinces Cordell, who has always hated his master, to throw Verger into the pen with the hogs instead. As a result, Verger dies in the exact way he had hoped to kill Lecter, and Lecter has promised Cordell he will take responsibility for the crime. Starling is taken to Krendler's lakefront home by Lecter, who attends to her gunshot wound. She wakes up in a bedroom upstairs and is ready for a fancy event. She locates a phone on her way downstairs and makes a police call. She seeks for Lecter downstairs rather than following their advice and leaving the house to wait for them to arrive. The seated Krendler, who has been deeply drugged and had his head shaved, is watching him as she discovers him in the dining room where he has arranged the table as though for a formal dinner party. Lecter removes the top of Krendler's skull, extracts a portion of his brain, the portion of his brain that Lecter claims is associated with good manners, sautés it in a pan at the table, and feeds it to the confused Krendler as Starling watches in horror. Clarice is appalled and begs Lecter to stop, promising to reveal the specifics of the FBI dossier on him so he can flee. Starling attempts to use a silver candlestick to strike Krendler with as Lecter wheels him back to the kitchen to clean up after the meal, but he is quickly defeated. Lecter locks her ponytail in the refrigerator. "Tell me, Clarice, would you ever tell me, stop? If you loved me, you'd stop," he begs. The answer from Starling is, "Not in 1,000 years. That's my girl," Lecter responds before kissing Starling. When he hears a click and turns to go, believing he has won, he discovers that Starling has shackled his wrist to her own. Thank you for watching and don't forget to like and subscribe.